Welcome back to another episode of Devil Dash. We are excited to be here. I'm Wills, joined by Josh. And Josh, every week we have another episode. It means another week we are closer to Sun Devil football.
That's right.
I ask you every week to start off the show, how excited are you?
I'm very excited, Willis.
I'm pretty excited too. We're going to get into more of the season in this episode. We're going to talk about what we think, we've talked about what we think ASU can do. I gave out my predictions on Sports Fact 12. But we're going to talk about what we should expect from these Sun Devils. I mean, everyone would love a Pac-12 South championship, but come on, those don't just grow on trees. So we need to be realistic. We're going to take a look at college football as a whole and kind of see where Jaden Daniels and Keaton Slovis fit in on that Heisman watch. And then we're going to talk about ASU's young receiving corps. And, we're going to talk about what to expect from them and who's going to step up this year, Alex, because no Ayuk and no N'Keal Harry. So there's going to be a lot of new faces. But to get into it, we're going to start off with ASU. And just to get a little brief history on the last 2 years under Herm Edwards. We're 15-11. I think we had a 7-6 year and then a year last year. We have a win over Florida State in the bowl game. But not a very impressive one. I want to say our defense got 5 turnovers, and we still barely won that game. So, Josh, I know everyone wants them to run the table, maybe see Oregon in the Pac-12 championship, but what do you think ASU fans should expect from this team? I know we gave out our picks on what we think, but what would you label as a successful season and a disappointing season?
I think the first thing that would stand out as a successful season for ASU would you take a look at our marquee games this on the schedule. We've got USC the first week and we've got Utah in there as well. Losing both of those games is like your regular ASU season. I mean, that's just how it is. That's what we've come to expect. We got ran by Utah last year, USC too. So that's what I expect going into it. But an exceptional season is, losing only one of those games. I mean, beating one of those teams or even both those teams is huge. And I mean, that could put the Sun Devils on a path to who knows what.
No, absolutely. And you talked about Utah. Last year's Utah game was one of the ugliest games I've seen, probably the ugliest game under Herm Edwards. But saying that is, Arizona sports in general, ASU fans have seen it for years. We've beaten the Michigan States, we've beaten the Washingtons, we've beaten the Oregons, but in those same seasons, it's not like we lose again to teams that, we're supposed to lose to. We lose to the Oregon States, we lose to the Colorados, we lose to the UCLAs. And it doesn't seem like just one upset happens every blue moon. It seems like it happens every year, and it seems like one of those losses happens every year. So saying that, my expectations for this ASU team is you must go 1-2 Pac-12 South top dogs, USC and Utah. You have to go 1-1. I don't care who you beat, but 1-1 sets you up for that tiebreaker of potentially if the team you lose to then loses to the team you beat, there's a 3-way head-to-head tiebreaker, and there'd be a bunch of different things. I don't know exactly how it's played out, but that's one. You need to go 1-1, 2-0, fantastic.
Honestly, 2-0, I feel like we should go 2-0 because that would put us, think about winning percentage and teams playing the caliber of teams and beating them. That would put us in a better position for Oregon.
Absolutely, it would. But I'm just trying to say realistically, this game's getting hyped up a lot with USC and ASU at the 9 a.m. kickoff. But realistically, I'm saying 1-1. 2-0 would be awesome. And then outside of that, I think you need to beat Cal. You need to prove that your conference, Pac-12 South, is better than the Pac-12 North. So Cal's getting a little more love than ASU, according to ESPN and some of these national writers. We follow the Pac-12 a little more. I think we know ASU is a little more talented than Cal, but Cal's still going to be a great team with a question mark with Chase Garbers at quarterback. So that being said, win the Cal game, 1-1 against USC and Utah, and then I think you have one loss there somewhere. In my article, I think it's going to be the UCLA. ASU doesn't play Colorado well historically, or I believe it's at Colorado this year. So I think if you can go 1-1 against those teams, a win against Cal, and set yourself up for one other loss, I think realistic expectations with 4-2, but looking at who those two losses are to. You can't, if you're 4-2 with 2 losses to USC and Utah, you're a failure because you got third place in the Pac-12 South and you really never had a shot at winning it. So Do you agree or disagree?
No, I do. I mean, when you take a bigger look at it, look at Todd Graham and look at Herm. I mean, there's a huge difference in like team morale, I feel like, in that area. But look at the schedule, the records, the team record at the end of the season, it's still the same. Been average, and this past year we got a little bit better, but we have to make that jump if you want to start even get Jaden Daniels in the contention for any other award.
And the thing about Jaden Daniels is that this season relies so much on his shoulders. I mean, the team goes as far as he can take us. I mean, we saw that last year. I mean, against Michigan State, our defense played phenomenal and kept us in that game. And so did Michigan State's kicker. I want to say he missed, 3 kicks last year or something ridiculous.
Thanks,
but yeah, thank you. But that being said, the defense is really not – they should be good. I want them to produce more turnovers this year, but they're not going to be a stellar top, maybe top half in the Pac-12, but not great nationally ranked. And so Jaden Daniels is really going to have to carry the weight of this team because, like you said, young receivers, Elijah Badger, I believe he just got ruled academically ineligible, and if he wasn't going to start for the Sun Devils at running back, he was going to get a lot of playing time. So that's a loss, and luckily I make a lot of plays on his feet and, get that rushing game kind of going through him. We see it with Kyler Murray in Arizona, a lot of things like that, but like I said, this team is really going to go as far as Jaden Daniels takes them. The defense might win them a game or two with a big pick six, a timely pick six, but, it's really going to fall on Herm Edwards in the play calling and Jaden Daniels because Herm Edwards, we all know he isn't really a guy that's going to go win a game by 20 points. If he's up 14 in the fourth quarter, he's going to run the ball until it's fourth down.
Pro-style football.
Exactly, and that's why we're getting better recruits is because of stuff like that. And, I mean, if you want to look at what Mike Leach is doing in the SEC. We saw him beat LSU, and everyone's like, holy crap, maybe the Pac-12 isn't as bad as, the air raid offense can work in the SEC. They scored 2 points last week. They scored 2 points last week against Kentucky. It wasn't Georgia, it wasn't Alabama, it wasn't Tennessee, it was Kentucky. They scored 2 points. So the Pac-12, we were talking about it with our producer before the show. The SEC is cannibalizing itself. The Pac-12 is really, and this is why I say you need to go 1-1 against the USC and Utah schools, is because to avoid that cannibalism happening to you. I mean, if you can get that week 1 win against Utah, you are full steam ahead and have all the momentum. What do you think about that?
I mean, you're 100% correct. I mean, like I said before, these are the 2 teams that we have to beat. I mean, in our schedule this year, USC and Utah, we have to go in and sweep them. Not just, I mean, it's going to be a close win. It's going to be a close win on November 7th against USC. But if we can pull off a dominating win, I mean, man, what would that do for our confidence, for Herm's speeches in the locker rooms? Just imagine being in there and getting all that together. I mean, this team could do it. It takes a lot of Jaden, like you said earlier. Yeah, I'll
get right back to, kind of Herm and motivation. We have a question from Kelly Rice. What is the likelihood we can win the Pac-12 championship? So we were talking about this before the show. ESPN, according to FPI, which is all computer database, it's not really, anyone's knowledge of watching football. It's kind of just computer database. But they have ASU at a 0%, to make the college football playoff is 0%. And I think if ASU is going to win the Pac-12 championship, I think they're going to be undefeated. I don't think with one loss, unless you go 2-0 against a USC and a Utah, and then maybe lose a game to Cal and go 5-1, because that's North, you have head-to-head against everyone else in the South. Then maybe you can get in with one loss. But all likelihood, if ASU were to be a team good enough to win the Pac-12 championship and beat an Oregon, they'd need to be undefeated. I really don't know if this can happen. It's a really cheap answer, but wait till after week 1. If they lose, their season's most likely over, unless they really rebound and can pull some stuff together to beat a Utah. If they lose week 1, the season's probably over. And same for USC as well. I mean, you really don't want to fall behind Utah and USC. To give you a percentage, it's on the lower side. To win the entire Pac-12 championship, I would say anywhere from 10 to 20%. To win the Pac-12 South, I think there's a higher chance. I want to say 40 to 45. I think USC gets a lot of that with about 55, probably about 50, and then I think Utah has a smaller 5% chance of winning.
Yeah, his answer just goes to show, I mean, how little room for error there is in this small schedule and the way these matchups line up. I mean, they matched us up against USC for a reason. I mean, they're gonna get one good game, and hopefully we come out on top.
Well, and you talked about those 2 wins of kind of getting momentum, and a win in week 1. I've mentioned as we talk about it kind of as a joke that the Herm train, a win that would get that Herm momentum going. The train of one win to start off that season over someone who I don't think any national writer is picking any ASU or USC or Utah to win it all. Or win the Pac-12 South. So, I mean, it's going to be tough, but I think that the momentum, like I said, it's a really cheap answer, but that week 1 game is going to be huge against USC to decide who's the winner and if any of them have a shot to beat in Oregon.
Yeah, don't you think that first game is really going to show between these 2 quarterbacks that depend on the Heisman race and how they do and all that?
Yeah, we're gonna get into that a little bit. Where kind of Keaton Slovis and Jane Daniels possibly could fall into the Heisman race, but last year Keaton Slovis had a great first quarter. I want to say they put up 21 or 28 points in the first. I want to say it was 28-0 at the end of the first. And I think ASU ended up pulling it back to maybe a 28-24 final. And Keaton Slovis looked fantastic in that first quarter, but really didn't have a great game after that. And we've talked about how Jane Daniels didn't even play in that game last year. It was actually Joey Yellen that played, and that was the only game that Jane missed in his career. So that matchup is going to be interesting because it's going to be one not only we'll see this year, but next year. And most likely both those quarterbacks are going to be going in the first round and most likely to pretty early to bad teams. Slovis probably a little bit higher right now than Jane Daniels, but it's going to be interesting. That week 1 game is definitely the biggest one circled, probably bigger than the University of Arizona game this year just because of how poor that football team is going to be. But yeah, so realistically, we're kind of talking about the floor for the Sun Devils this year. Outside of the USC and Utah game, what do you think is an acceptable loss for this season? Do you see a Cal, or do you think maybe you see them losing to a Colorado or a UCLA, and that might happen?
So our trap game this year, is it Cal?
So our trap game, our crossover game is Cal this year with the North. Their trap games are all kind of what you look at the schedule and decide as a trap game is, but. I think people are going to overlook Cal this year. I think Cal is going to be a good team. I still think ASU can beat them, but it's going to be interesting because, like I said, they were better than ASU last year until Chase Garbers got hurt in that game. So,
I think if we beat USC and we can beat Utah, I think a loss to Cal is acceptable, honestly.
And I agree with that because a loss to Cal doesn't hurt you because you don't lose the head-to-head to any of those teams in the Pac-12 South where you're not competing with Cal for the South. So we're going to switch over. We just talked about Keaton Slovis and Jane Daniels and what this matchup could mean. But we talked before, we knew Pac-12 was coming back, before we knew any football was coming back, where we thought, Keaton Slovis, according to Vegas, had pretty high odds to win the Heisman. I want to say he was in the top 7 to win Heisman. Not sure on that. But there's 4 players, 2 teams that pretty dominant in the Heisman talk right now. I mean, Clemson and Alabama with Trevor Lawrence and Travis Etienne and Mac Jones and Najee Harris. Who do you think's your Heisman favorite right now?
Out of those 4, it has to be Trevor Lawrence. I mean, that guy's a stud. He's gonna lead Clemson to another playoff appearance, and I can't wait to complain about that first matchup of the team they play where they beat them 41-0.
Well, hopefully that's a Pac-12 team. Hopefully a Pac-12 team can sneak into that 4th spot.
Unless it's a Pac-12 team. If it's a Pac-12 team, I won't be complaining.
But that being said, Clemson, Trevor Lawrence is a stud. This guy's going to go number 1 in the draft when he's eligible to get drafted. He's lost 1 game ever in his career, and people remember that was a game against LSU, against one of the best college football teams ever, single-year teams ever last year. And they were in that game for 2.5 to 3 quarters. It got away from him at the end, but that's Trevor Lawrence's only loss. And when you're looking at the ACC schedule, I know Notre Dame plays in this. I don't know if they're on their schedule, but they might play them in the championship. That's going to be a tough game. Notre Dame looks pretty good this year, but outside of that, they just handled Miami, and everyone was saying to use back. So I really don't see a loss coming for Clemson unless they run into a buzzsaw at Notre Dame. But I think Trevor Lawrence is a safe pick because I don't think they're going to lose before the Heisman gets voted. And I love Najee Harris. That guy, every year Bama has a running back that seems like in high school he would have run for 500 yards a game. It's just every year they have a new running back, somebody that's bigger and faster and quicker than you. And Najee Harris is going to be someone that they could very well be undefeated as well. I mean, the SEC isn't great this year. Besides Georgia and Bama, Auburn's been decent, but do you really trust Bo Nix? The SEC isn't – Florida's great, but they just got a tough loss to A&M too. So, like I said, I think Bama has a good shot to go undefeated. You might see a tough game against Tennessee or something like that, but it's going to be tough to see it.
I think Alabama's a clear shot too to the college football playoff. I mean,
absolutely.
I think we just saw their hardest game of the year against Ole Miss. Honestly,
they do. Ole Miss does always play them tough every year, but I'm wondering.
Mac Jones went crazy in that game too.
He did. I'm wondering though, and so did Najee Harris though. If Bama runs the table and goes undefeated, and Clemson runs the table and goes undefeated, I know Trevor Lawrence doesn't have that Heisman win yet. And also, sorry, before I move on with this, don't forget Justin Fields' name from Ohio State. He's gonna put up a splash in the Big Ten, and he's gonna make his name known very quickly in that Heisman contender watch. So I think that's a fifth name to keep your eye on. But with these two guys, I'm wondering, with the last three off the top of my head Heisman winners, Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray, and Joe Burrow, 3 quarterbacks in a row. If Najee Harris puts up some of the best running back numbers we've seen, and he's doing it right now, and they're also undefeated, I'm wondering if this recency quarterback bias could earn Najee Harris a few extra nods in the voting because, running backs, especially Bama running backs, do tend to get some love. Ask Derrick Henry. And voters like undefeated teams. And I think the SEC is going to be a little bit tougher than the ACC will be just schedule-wise.
Well, I mean, I think you're right on that. I mean, I could see it happening, but I wish it would have happened a little earlier. I mean, I feel like Travis Etienne has his first 2 seasons with Clemson, he was just eating all day on the field.
Yeah.
And I was just seeing highlight after highlight of him taking the football 85 yards to the house. I mean, I don't know how he kind of didn't get it over like other people like Baker and stuff like that. But I mean, maybe we'll see the quarterback trend keep going. I mean, there's a lot of season left, and also I do think. I don't know about Justin Fields. Justin Fields. I think there is very little room for error, and I feel like Alabama. I feel like Mac Jones, Najee Harris, and like Etienne, their teams have a more established team, and they can do better this season. So I don't see Justin Fields winning it.
We have a question. I'll get to it in just a second. I want to touch on this. Justin Fields. The reason I think he has a good shot is because Ohio State was on the forefront. We saw the parents in the Big Ten of, we want college football back. And, Ohio State there's been talk out of there, this could be one of the best Ohio State teams we've seen in a very long time. And I think if they're dominant, I think the Big Ten is going to be one of the toughest conferences. I mean, I know the SEC football always reigns supreme over everyone else, but I think talent-wise this year, I think Penn State's going to be really solid. I think Minnesota's going to be really solid. Wisconsin's always very good. And, it's just off the top of my head, there's going to be probably 4 or 5 other ranked teams in there. There always are from 15 to 24, there's like 4 or 5 Big Ten teams every year. But I think if they can get some quality wins and Justin Fields can put up big numbers against not necessarily the great teams like Penn State and Wisconsin's, but if he can get one of those teams that comes in ranked number 24 and puts up 400 yards, 50, 60 yards rushing, that's going to be something that looks a lot more solid than Clemson going and beating up on a Duke team and he throws for 400 yards in that game. So I think he could get the edge just based on a few tougher games alone, but I'm not picking him to win it. I just think he's a name. He's gonna jolt himself right into that conversation. We're gonna hop over to a question. Regardless of the outcome of this season, can ASU still continue to gain top recruits next year? Next year, I think absolutely, because you're gonna have a junior year Jaden Daniels. There's gonna be a lot of players that want to play for him. He's gonna be a first-round draft pick, most likely, barring injuries or some kind of freak accident. But he's gonna be a first-round draft pick, and we already have a lot of talented players. We have a pro coaching staff that we've talked about all the time. And, we're producing first-round talent now with Brandon Ayuk, N'Keal Harry. And not only are they're not just O-linemen, we kind of picked up that we got from the farms in Arizona. These are skilled position receivers that ASU has had go in the first round the last 2 years. So as long as Jaden Daniels is there, and ASU, frankly, has always recruited really good, highly rated quarterbacks, 4 and 5 stars, pretty much since I can remember being a fan. I mean, honestly, it's been a really long time since we've had a really poor quarterback. So I think at least for next year, we're going to gain a lot of great recruits. who comes in at quarterback, because if you have a bad quarterback, skilled position players aren't going to want to play for him. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, Herm is always going to have the ability to recruit. I mean, he's that charismatic guy, and he's going to make connections to certain players faster than others. But we have a lot more than Herm. I mean, we have a pro staff, and our program is still trending in an upward direction. I mean, hopefully we get some not only recruits, hopefully we get a couple transfers, not leaving the team but coming into the team, and we'll see. I mean, I feel like this season really, regardless of the outcome, we will recruit, but this season does have a big factor of almost everything to do with next season.
Yeah, and one thing I think ASU's done well, I know a lot of schools do this, but they do it well in basketball especially, but they've been pretty good about getting junior college transfers that come in ready to play. I mean, I think last year they brought someone in that started on an offensive line, and then this year we got a Texas A&M grad transfer who's going to come in and start from day one. So, they do a pretty good job of attacking those guys. And one of my favorite Sun Devils of all time, Jalen Strong, was a JUCO transfer, came in as a junior. So, they do a good job of that, maybe not getting the younger guys, but getting experienced players ready to play.
And don't forget former USC player, Jack Jones.
Yeah, Jack Jones, absolutely. He's been a starter for us.
Yeah,
pretty
thanks,
good. Thanks, USC. So we're going to, we talked about the recruits. There's a great question for our transition, but, ASU's receivers, that's probably where we've gotten the most notable names in the recruiting class this year. But a lot of young guys. You want to talk about the inexperience? I know you were telling me about the stats earlier, and we just lost N'Keal Harry, we just lost Brandon Ayuk, and the stat that you had about Frank Darby, what was that one? It was
Frank Darby is the only wide receiver on the team who has over 10 catches at the Division I football level. I mean, that's kind of ridiculous when you think about it, but we've definitely got a lot of talent there. Yeah,
and actually, ASU's we talked about transfers going out. ASU just had their first player transfer out of the program, not transfer. He opted out due to COVID concerns, so he's still on the team, but he won't be playing this year. Ricky Pearsall, who not a really big name, but someone he's probably going to be the number 2 or 3 for Arizona State this year. He only had about 7 catches in his career so far, and not a ton of big ones. I think he was 3rd on the ASU depth chart going into the season, so it's a loss for sure. But it's not like you're losing a Frank Darby or one of these big name recruits coming in.
Look, it is obviously it's a loss, right? Like we lost Ayuk and we lost Harry, but think about the new offensive coordinator coming. Reading a lot of articles. I mean, they've got a new scheme going. They've got a new scheme going. There's a lot of moving parts, and if you think about it, just think about how young these guys are, how impressionable they are for a guy like Herm Edwards and all these professional coaches. They're gonna fit right in. I mean, they're gonna play hard. They're gonna perform. Everyone's gonna get their shot. And the best thing about practice the past couple of days is that everyone's freaking trying for a spot. No one's spot is secured yet, and
except for Jane Daniels.
Iron sharpens iron. That's gonna bring the best out of everybody. So I think you can expect a lot. Not N'Keal Harry, but
it's going to be seeing games. We talked about this team's only going to go as far as Jaden Daniels takes them. We've seen games against Utah last year where nothing was going, or even against Oregon where Frank Darby had a big play. Brandon Ayuk had the big play where he took the O and chucked it down and kicked it. Is Frank Darby going to be that go-to 3rd and 7 receiver where you can rely on him to get you that big play? I don't know. I really don't. I want to say yes. I want to say he's ready to take that same step that Ayuk took after Harry left, and I hope he is, but that's what I'm saying. If Jaden Daniels is having a bad game and, we are running into a good defense, like Cal has a great defense, Utah has a great defense. If we play a game like that and Jaden Daniels isn't playing his best game, I'm just wondering where this production is going to come from, of what receiver is going to step up, because we don't know. We haven't seen a lot. 3 freshman recruits coming in that are going to play this year for the Sun Devils. We haven't seen any of them play in ASU colors, so we can't really rely on any of them to be, that number 1 receiver. So a lot of the weight's being put on Darby, but I think a lot of the weight has to be put on Jaden Daniels as well.
I think, like you said, like we talked about earlier, Jaden, a lot of the offense is going to come through Jaden, right? But Frank Darby is his number one. Frank Darby has to be his number one. And, ever since they got on the field, no pads or pads on, I don't care. They've been practicing like he's his number one. So the connection will be there. Don't worry about that. I mean, Frank Darby, if you've ever seen Frank Darby too, game time or not, this dude's dancing on the sideline. He could catch an 80-yard pass, run to the house, he'll dance. He could fumble the ball after a 50-yard run, and he'll still be smiling. This guy doesn't take it too seriously. He competes, but, he's having fun. And I feel like that's kind of the perfect makeup you want for a guy who's going to be, your number one for the team. He's still a young quarterback, and a lot of young, impressionable guys, too. They don't want Mr. Businessman, right? And some of them might, but they still want the fun college party guy, right?
You get that from Herm Edwards. You get the business Herm Edwards.
Yeah.
But the thing about Darby, a lot of people don't know this. He's probably the smartest guy on the team. He actually works at I don't want to get the hospital wrong, but I want to say it's the Barrow Neurological. He works in the neurological department with Barrow as a full-time worker. And he has his major, I don't know it off the top of my head, but it's one of those majors where I could say it out loud and I still don't know what he's studying because it's that confusing. So that's how you know he's smart. And the thing about him on the field is that dating back to even his sophomore year, when ASU came back from the 19-point comeback against U of A, he gets open. This man does get open, but he has so many opportunities where he still gets a number, he'll still get 60 yards, in some games, but those 60 yards were available for 120 yards because he drops a lot of passes. His hands they weren't as much of an issue last year, but they have been in his ASU career. If he's ready to take that number one step, he needs to get rid of the drops. And, I think a lot of his number one, I guess, title will come from the leadership and how he helps grow these young freshmen because, N'Keal Harry, Brandon Ayuk, I don't remember if Ayuk was a senior last year. I know Harry was a junior, but
I think Ayuk was a junior
as well. No, he was a senior. Yeah, he was a senior as well. So yeah, it's someone like Darby. I don't think Ayuk was as vocal as a leader as Darby would be because Ayuk had a lot of antics, I guess you could say. As ASU fans, we loved him. Like I mentioned, the slamming of the O and kicking, makes for a great gif on Twitter, but it's not stuff you're going to see from Frank Darby.
Yeah, we don't know yet. Who knows how much bigger, I should say, this guy has gotten in the offseason. We could see him averaging 15 yards per catch halfway through the season like Ayuk was doing last year.
Yeah,
that's best case scenario. But I know he'll be ready. I know the whole team will be ready for week one. And that is the only thing that should be on their minds from this day on.
Yeah, and I'm curious with Darby we saw N'Keal Harry. He was kind of a more complete college receiver where he could beat you on routes. He wasn't the fastest, but he was, could go get the ball in the air. Ayuk had a lot more big play capability, and we've seen that in the NFL as well. I'm curious to see what role Darby fits in. Is he going to be more of a big play receiver where he might get 3 catches a game, but those 3 catches might be for 100 yards? Or is he going to be more of a, 8-9 catches for 100 yards? And, we're going to kind of feed the offense through him. I think it depends how much our running game is going without Elijah Badger. I think that's going to be something to watch. And then how well our defense is playing. If our defense is getting throttled, we're going to have to run the ball more because we're going to have to keep them off the field just for their own sake. And I know Herm likes to run clock anyways, but it's going to be definitely something to keep an eye on.
What do you think the effect of Chad Johnson Jr., his dad,
we can get into
has
this
on the practice squad or just the team in general? Because I saw a picture of him at practice the other day, just straight flexing with Darby.
So we got to wrap this up, and I think this is something we can save for next week because I have a lot to say about this. But that whole kind of USC thing, we saw it with Reggie Bush of having these celebrities on the sidelines, the Snoop Dogs, that's sweet. That is awesome. It's great for recruiting. It's great for LA and Hollywood, but it can really get to a lot of these players' heads, with accepting money, accepting, whatever. And, this fame of kind of being with Chad Johnson on the sideline. I think it's something to keep an eye out for. But we do have to wrap it up. I would love to talk about that next week. Make sure to follow us on all social media at Dash Sports TV, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, MySpace, TikTok, or whatever there is. We're on it. Our website is at www.dashsports.tv. Keep an eye out. I have an article coming out for, kind of what we talked about in the first segment, what kind of the floor is for this ASU football team and what we can expect. And if you're not following Pac-12 or at Dash Sports Media, go follow us, and we will see you next week. Thank you for watching.